Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head in the Cloud Development. Today I'm going to walk you through a full example of creating a MapReduce script in NetSuite. For this tutorial, I've chosen a scenario that's a simple enough concept, but that is just complicated enough to be able to demonstrate the full power of a MapReduce script. The task we're going to be doing in our MapReduce script is to generate invoices for all of our open sales orders. And then we're going to send one email to each customer that includes PDFs of the invoices we've created. For our development environment, we'll be using WebStorm. We'll be coding in TypeScript and uploading to NetSuite using the Head in the Cloud uploader. The HITC uploader bundle in NetSuite is totally free and open for anyone to use. If you're not familiar with TypeScript and WebStorm, I'd recommend you watch my other YouTube video first, which is a tutorial for setting up this build environment. The title of it is NetSuite SuiteScript 2.0 Intro WebStorm. That being said, if you're not a fan of TypeScript, don't worry, I'm still showing the resulting JavaScript code as well. And of course, the point of this video is not to demonstrate TypeScript or the Head in the Cloud uploader. The focus is on demonstrating how a MapReduce script works. And finally, don't worry if you can't read every bit of code you see clearly on the YouTube screen here, as you can download all the related code, both TypeScript and JavaScript, from a link I'll be posting in the comments here. Okay, let's get to it. First, let's look at what our goal is here. In NetSuite, if I go to my invoice sales orders screen, I see that I have 322 sales orders here to bill. Some of these orders need to be billed as cash sales, while others will have invoices created. And as you see, some customers have multiple orders here. So again, what we're going to be doing in our MapReduce script is to bill all these orders, and we're going to send one email to each customer that includes PDFs of their billing transactions. Now let's get coding. Before we start, here's a quick preview of what the finished script will look like. As you can see, the entire thing is only 76 lines long, so I hope that's not too scary. And now here is our starting point. What I have here is an empty shell of a MapReduce script. Every time I start a new MapReduce script, I always start with something like this. These are the standard 4 script entry points for a MapReduce script, and I have comments here to remind us of how many execution points we get in each of them. So first we have our getInputData entry point. This function runs first and is usually where you'll do a search or something to identify the data that your script is going to process. This function always returns either an array of data to process or search results directly. Second, we have the map function. This is generally where most of the work happens in MapReduce. You'll notice that this function gets 1,000 usage points. That may not sound like a lot, but remember that this function is generally only processing one record, and 1,000 points is usually enough to do just about anything once. Let me reiterate this because this is the most important key in the power of a MapReduce script. The power here is that if your getInputData function returns a list of 100 records to process, then there will be 100 different instances of this map function, one to handle each of the results from getInputData. And for performance, that means that if you have 10 different script queues, NetSuite can process 10 records concurrently. Nowadays, every NetSuite account has at least 2 script queues, so this at least doubles the performance from any scheduled script. Many MapReduce scripts only use a map or a reduce function, not both. If you only need to do one thing for each record, you may not need to break the operation into 2 stages. Because of that, the map function here doesn't necessarily return anything. But if you are using a reduce function, then here you can return a key value pair that feeds into the reduce stage. Finally, we have the summarize function. This runs last and only once. It can be used for any final wrap-up actions or just logging like we have here. This may be difficult to envision at this point, seeing as how we just have 4 empty functions here. I promise to make it more clear in a minute, but first, let's upload this script to NetSuite and run it as is. And as promised, here's a quick preview of the JavaScript version. So now in NetSuite, I'll create our script record. When you're deploying a MapReduce script, the concurrency limit here is an important setting. It defaults to 1, which means that there is no concurrency, but you can clear the field to let it use all of your available script queues. I'm going to go ahead and execute this script, and we should just see our execution logs. And here we see our 2 execution logs. Great, so nothing is broken yet. You may notice that neither map nor reduce ran here, and that's because we didn't return any data in our getInput function. Okay, back to our focus here. Remember, I said our goal here is to bill sales orders and send a consolidated email to each customer. Let me show you a diagram of how that's going to work in MapReduce. So the 4 levels we have here match our 4 script entry points. At the top, we have getInputData. This is where we're going to do a search to figure out which orders need to be billed. Then we'll pass these orders to a map phase. Here, each order will get billed by a separate instance of the map function. After that, an instance of reduce will run for each customer that we processed orders for in map. We'll generate a PDF and send them to the customer. Finally, summarize will run at the very end. It's great to start with a good plan, so let's take this and make some comments in our scripts to see what should happen in each phase. Okay, I think we're finally ready to really get into it here. So the first thing we need to do is identify which sales orders need to get billed. The simplest way we can do this is just to return the internal IDs of the sales orders that need to be billed. For that, we'll initialize an empty array in getInputData, and we'll have the function return this array. Next, we need to do a search to find the orders to bill. Now we could sit here and create a search in code, but that would mean that if anybody wanted to change the criteria in the future, they'd have to update this script. That's no good. So instead, let's use a script parameter that references a saved search in NetSuite. So here on the script record, I'll add a parameter for the saved search. We'll make it mandatory since this script can't really run without it. I'll copy this parameter ID so we can use it in our script. And I'm going to edit my script deployment so I can set a saved search here. And I just happen to have an orders to bill search that we can use. Okay, so we can use the runtime module to get the value of this script parameter. Now let's update our execution log to here to log which search is being used. Now we can load and run this saved search. For each result, we'll add the sales order ID into our array. And that's it for getInputData. Now we'll move on to the map function. The very first thing we're going to do here is to set up a try-catch block. Due to the nonlinear execution of MapReduce scripts, errors can be very tricky to find otherwise. This will make sure that we can easily identify if anything goes wrong. Okay, so now what we need to start with is the ID of the sales order that we need to process. We get this from the context.value here, which is the data passed in from the getInputData function. Now let's log what internal ID we've retrieved along with a timestamp. Now the complicated thing here is that some orders need to get billed as cash sales while others need to be done as invoices. Rather than try to figure out which is which, we can simply try both and see which one works. So first we'll try billing it as a cash sale. We'll use the record.transform method to initialize a cash sale. If that fails, it means it needs to be billed as an invoice. Now in your own NetSuite account, if you know that most orders are done as invoices, you can reverse these steps to improve performance. So now we'll save the transaction and log that it was created. And finally, for the reduce stage, we need to know who the customer is. So we're going to get that from the billing transaction here. So then to pass the data to reduce, we use context.write, where the key is the customer ID and the value is the billing transaction ID that we just created. Okay, now on to reduce. So again, first, we'll set up our try-catch block. So for the values in the context of reduce, let's say we processed 5 orders for the same customer in map. What that would look like is one reduce function where the key is that customer ID and the 5 billing transaction IDs would be an array context.values. So now we need to extract our customer ID from the context object from context.key. So the idea here is that we're going to send an email to this customer. Now again, we could hard code the content of that email here, but I have a better idea. Let's set up a script parameter so that users can choose which email template to use. So again, on my script, I'm going to create a new parameter for the email template. And I'm going to go to my script deployment. I'm going to show you which email template I'm going to be using. Here I have a very simple email template, and we'll set the deployment to use this one. Again, I'll copy the parameter ID to use in the script. So now again, we'll pull this email template parameter using the runtime module. And we're going to convert it to a number because that's what the render module expects it as. Now we'll use the render module to merge that email template with our customer. So let's go ahead and set up the call to the email module to send the email with what we have here so far. I'm going to set myself as the author of the email using my employee internal ID. The recipients is an array of internal IDs. We'll get the subject from the merge email operation. And we'll get the body from the rendered template as well. But wait, we haven't added our transaction PDFs here yet. For this, we'll initialize an empty array of files, then we'll add that to be included in our email. Now we need to generate PDFs for each of the transactions that we generated in our map stage. We can use a for loop to iterate over the context.values array here because each context value is a billing transaction ID from our map stage. So again, we'll use the render module to generate the PDF for this billing transaction. And we'll push that file into our attachments array. And guess what? We're done. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now let's upload and test this. So again, I'll show you what the JavaScript version comes out looking like. Here's get input data. Here's our map function. And here's our reduce function. Not very different from the TypeScript. Okay, let's run this. So to run this, I'll edit the script deployment and then click Save and Execute again. Now, as we watch the script execution logs, we can see by the timestamps that the script is using both of my SuiteScript processors to process orders concurrently. If you have more than 2 processors in your NetSuite account, you'll see it processing even more than 2 sales orders at the same time here. And as I refresh the logs, I see that it is actually creating transactions. So as you can see, first the map stage is running, and once the map stage is finished producing all the billing transactions, the reduce stage will run. And at that point, if you check the Communications tab on my employee record, you would see the emails that are getting sent out. And this concludes our MapReduce script tutorial. Please get in touch if you have any questions or feedback. Otherwise, we'll see you at SuiteWorld. Thank you for watching.